Welcome back, students, to our fifth lecture. This one, part of a group of lectures where we're talking about the concepts of the geographic perspective. In the last lecture, I talked to you about location. For geographers, sort of the various ways of identifying location as absolute or relative, and the ways that locational data is collected by geographers. In this lecture, I'm going to be talking to you about the concept of place. Essentially, what makes a location unique, what makes it into a place for us, and not just a mathematical location. One of the sort of strongest, most distinctly identifiable things that is going to make a location unique to other locations on the earth are the cultures that are represented there. As one of our vocab words, we're going to be defining culture as the body of customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits that together constitute a group's distinct tradition. Culture comes from a Latin word, cultus, which means to care for, all right? And that can help us think about also how we're going to kind of define culture and how it's making a location distinct, how it's turning it into a place. So we can break culture down into, and your textbook does this, into thinking about what people care about and what people take care of, right? What people care about, we're thinking of in this sense, the things that are not tangible, right? Not physical, but that are carried within us, right? And cannot be sort of maybe necessarily seen, but still bring a distinctive character to the landscape. Languages, religions, our ethnic backgrounds, these are all part of what we're going to define as culture, and we'll explore each of them individually later on in this year. Another aspect of that that's going to be maybe more directly identifiable in parts of the landscape is what people take care of, right? The material wealth, the stuff people actually take care of, our food, our clothing, our shelter, and how those things might be distinct, or generally are distinct, at different locations, right? And help transform those locations into unique places by the smells and sights and homes and buildings that are distinct in that area. All right. It's also in thinking about material wealth that the world gets divided into MDCs and LDCs. These are terms that geographers and economists and politicians like to use to group the world into kind of rich and poor. All right. Or MDC and LDC, more developed countries and less developed countries. And we're going to talk about those terms and all the different ways that you can categorize countries as MDC or LDC throughout the year. So talking about culture helps us think about what it is that's actually going to make an area distinct. Another way that we can do that is by how we identify those places, the names that we give them, as well as talking about the concepts of site and situation. But all three of them are various ways of identifying a place, okay? The things that make a place unique are also used to identify its location, all right? So, the name, the site, the situation of Nevada can also be used to know where Nevada is located. And we'll give you some examples of that here as well. So as far as identification goes, place names are quite simply the names that we give to places to identify them, all right? For geographers, they use the word toponym to refer to that same thing, the name given to a portion of Earth's surface, whether that's a river or a lake or a city or town or a province or state or country or what have you. The name given to some portion of Earth's surface is a toponym. And you can look at that at all kinds of scales, right? The United States or Germany or Japan, Nevada or California or Arizona, Las Vegas, Reno, Jackpot, Tahoe, something like that. But Lake Tahoe brings up a kind of interesting example. Up until 1945, if you were in California, Lake Tahoe was known as Lake Bigler after one of the people that this lake was originally named after. If you were in Nevada, it was Lake Tahoe. Until 1945, these two different places, California and Nevada, had two different ways of identifying this same lake, right, through two different toponyms. You see that in a lot of different situations. For example, we call Germany Germany, right? But in Germany, they might refer to their country as Deutschland, right? As using their own language to identify it. So an important thing to keep in mind is that the names that we have for places might not be the names that those places use for themselves. One place on the earth that has several different toponyms for various places located within it are the British Islands, right? And we might use a couple of these terms, interchangeably when we're referring to a particular country or something, even though it might not be the most accurate way to do that, right? So you're looking at the British Islands here, and a couple different toponyms can be applied here, all right? Great Britain and the United Kingdom are things that I hear in my history class and geography class used interchangeably, right? Both of them to refer to one country. The thing is that Great Britain refers to sort of the big island, right? Between Ireland and Great Britain, right? Great Britain is the island that contains Scotland and England and Wales. But the United Kingdom is sort of the collection of republics that make up the country of the United Kingdom, all right? And includes Northern Ireland in addition to Wales, England, and Scotland. The British Islands refers to all of that plus the rest of the island of Ireland, all right? So site and situation are the final ways we'll talk about place identification. And as one of our vocab words, site refers to the unique internal physical character of a place, including its absolute location and spatial character. I like to talk about it as a way that you describe a place, okay? In all the ways that you might do that. It's climate, it's water sources, it's kind of topographical or elevational kind of layout, the soil quality, the kinds of vegetation you might find at that site or location, its latitude and longitude, the kind of actual mathematical location. But the specific and various ways you can describe a site. I like to think of it almost like you're talking about a construction site, right? What is there? What is at that spot? And how would you describe it, right? That is a way to identify a place, is by its site characteristics, what it actually looks like at location. Situation is another way that we identify a place, but in this case, situation, like relative location, is your place relative to another place, right? The attributes or characteristics of some place relative to somewhere else. So an example of what that might be like is talking about the country of Singapore, or city-state of Singapore, being situated along a major shipping passage in Southeast Asia, right? So we're talking about its location relative to this important shipping lane that it is located next to, right? We're talking about its relative location. Talking about it in that way helps us to understand the importance of that place, right? Identifying its location relative to these important other places like trade routes or other big cities or highways, freeways, etc. Now, more simply, in our day-to-day lives, we're more likely to use situation to identify locations in terms of directions, right? So I spoke about this earlier, but you might think about an example of telling somebody directions like to go over the railroad tracks, turn right at the McDonald's, and it's the third house on the right. All of those details being relative locations, right? Past these railroad tracks, go near this McDonald's, go past these three houses, right? And that's how you're going to find my location relative to these other landmarks. And And that concludes lecture 5 on place, where I talk to you about the various ways that places or locations are made into unique places, either through the distinct cultures and the immaterial traits of that culture, the languages, religions, ethnic characteristics that we might see on the landscape, or the material culture of that place. We talked about place names and toponyms and how places are identified through these names that they are given by cartographers or explorers or geographers. We talked about site and situation, how site refers to the characteristics of a place at its location, the elevation, the climate, the soil type, the vegetation you see in those areas, and the concept of situation, or a place's location relative to other locations, right? And how that gives it some kind of value or importance, or helps us understand why that spot might be special and a unique place. Thanks a lot, guys. I hope that helps, and talk to you again soon.